And the sad thing is, like, Furiosa isn't a terrible movie.
It's a 7 out of 10.
Perfectly good movie
Right.
in its own right, but it's not hitting the spot in terms of what your audience wants. Like as you said there, if you were to do Mad Max 4 with Mel Gibson as old Mad Max, I think you would have done crazy numbers at the box office. Like the nostalgia factor would have kicked in big time. Dude, it would have been fan service of the highest order, but it doesn't matter. You're making money.
We're in an era that's ready to go on old man X movies. We got all kinds of shit ready to go for that.
Old man Blade, fine.
I mean, old man Wolverine, as they baited the cameo section, right? Like that's what they could do at any point that people would go see it.
But you know what? What I'm also missing though is the audience for. There's a lot of really innovative. There's a movie out now called Strange Darling. I would encourage everyone to go see. A low budget film. But and it's not a big studio movie, but it's a great little indie movie that if I would have seen it, in 1984, it would have been now a stone cold genre classic. But people don't know that they're out there, and I'd love to see more people. When I was growing up, I had a healthy diet of both B movies the Terminator. When the Terminator came out, no one really knew much about it. James Cameron was coming off of working on things like Galaxy of Terror and Escape from New York, and he'd done Piranha 2: The Spawning. And when you go to see...
He also did Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, he worked on that, the effects of that. And but going to see the Terminator in the theater, not, to me, it was like RoboCop. It had a title that wasn't exactly highbrow, and you sat in that theater, and it was really a revelation. That Terminator is 40 years old, and the Netflix anime series just dropped. So, which I hear is quite good.
What did you think when you saw Genesis for the first time and you saw them go back into the Terminator and fuck with the whole story and then decanonize Terminator 2?
It's baffling to me. And it's like, I understand, like, we talked about Salvation. At least Salvation tried to do something. It's on imperfect on its own merits. Where you will look at Genesis and they're just like replaying again. It was like Alien Romulus, just this greatest hits thing over and over again. And
up until Salvation, they sort of maintained the timeline where it's like Terminator 3 kind of implied like, okay, Judgment Day still happened, you just postponed it. Like, okay, it's bullshit, but like, fine, okay. So Judgment Day still happens eventually, and then you get into the future war against Skynet with Salvation, which again maintains the integrity of the timeline to a degree.
Somewhat.
And then then you get to Genesis and then Dark Fate, which just say, fuck it, everything that came before X, Y, and Z is just irrelevant now.
And then Dark Fate decanonized everything again. But I was just going to say quick on Salvation, the Terminator is incredibly dear to me. What they did to it was horrible. The Salvation's choice to be like, we're going to have a future war movie. It's like, oh, that's amazing. And they don't even slightly use the style or atmosphere from the future scenes of Terminator 1 and 2.
No.
Not even close. It's like, what the fuck were you thinking? That was all the fans were blown away by those scenes. And you didn't pick them up at all.
They were super intense. So to have an entire movie based around that would be quite hardcore.
I'm not talking about like your constant explosions or anything, which, by the way, they had a lot of in Salvation. I'm talking about the way it was shot.
The look,
the style, they had nothing. Not even like I didn't even feel the scrappy sort of on the edge of existence nature of the rebelling forces, right? Like the humanity down to its last, because you get the story of trying to set up Kyle Reese in Salvation as well. I'll at least say the casting. I forget his name, the actor who died, who was Chekhov in the reboot.
Oh, Anton Yelchin.
That's it, yeah. Far better casting for Kyle Reese than what's his name? Jai Courtney, yeah.
God,
that
Kai Courtney.
His casting as Kyle Reese and Amelia Clarke as Sarah Connor killed me when I was watching.
Horrendous. Some of the worst casting in a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
I just shared this because I wanted to get your thoughts on which of these movies do you think an audience actually really wants to see? Because I know you. Drinker, you made a video saying that Hollywood are turning the corner and they're getting away from the message and beginning to try to appeal more to a broader audience. And out of this, what do you think general audiences will show up for and actually want to see, as opposed to what Hollywood wants them to see?
I want them to see Nobody 2. I want people to see that because Nobody was quite a good movie. Blade. I want the Wesley Snipes version of that. I want Old Man Blade.
Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Yes.
What?
Megan 2.0.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Right, Freddy's. Mthregan 2.
Mithregan 2.
You know what? We should like disqualify the ones we know will be successful. Which I can't believe him say this, but that's not Mission Impossible 8. That ain't gonna make its money, is it?
I think it might. I think if they can distance themselves from Dead Reckoning.
It ran into Barbenheimer. And also Sound of Freedom, like it got a little bit unlucky with the release drop, but I don't know. I
still don't fully know.
I feel like a hindsight argument. Nobody ever would have thought that like Mission Impossible was going to be killed by Barbenheimer. I just don't.
It lost its IMAX screens to Oppenheimer, which was a massive financial blow.
Well, we'll see this time around. I think they need to market it as the final Mission Impossible. This is huge. You have to come see this. This is Tom Cruise's, baby that's been lasting for generations. You got it. Like, if they do that, they might be able to do it.
Is it the final Mission Impossible?
Yes. I mean, if it made $2 billion, they'd probably make another one.
Yes.
You look at this release schedule, and it's fine. But the real question is anything here going to be a zeitgeist movie that people are just excited to see? Or are they just going because it's something? That's the thing. That what we're missing here. Like, I really want to see F1 because seeing Joe Kosinski shoot F1 car racing the way he shot Top Gun Maverick, I'll watch that simply because I can't wait to see that. I don't know if anybody
is that the Brad Pitt one?
Yeah.
So we've got Brad Pitt, a 60-year-old F1 driver.
A 60-year-old F1. I know, right? But the driving scenes will be just like Tom Cruise, a 60-year-old fighter pilot. But it's I look at all this stuff and I'm thinking, why? If you look at this, what in any of this is exciting from an innovative? It's all stuff that we've been seeing. So, I read an article, a really interesting article. I think I now will do my show on it tonight. That there used to be a discovery part of going to the movies, where you would see something that you didn't know what it was going to be. It kind of came out of nowhere. You'd heard it was good. You go see it, and it was nothing like anything you'd seen before. That was true of the Terminator. My friends and I went and saw it, and it was like we're in high school, like, maybe this movie will be good. And from the first 10 seconds of when that movie starts, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And you're locked in. Because the themes, The Matrix was like that too. I went with a jaded bunch of industry people to the Warner Brothers lot. People thought, was this Johnny Mnemonic 2? What was this? Nobody really knew anything about it. And I'll never forget sitting in that theater, and when Keanu Reeves is revealed to be a human battery after being red-pilled, I was like, I was blown away. And that was, 45 minutes into the movie?
That felt shared too culturally, like
100%. And that's what, and the same was true of Barbenheimer. That was a cultural shared zeitgeist event. Both Oppenheimer and Barbie were original movies, even though Barbie might have been based on an IP, but what was going on there was interesting and unique. And that's what cinema is completely missing. And if people don't understand that movies, the new movies, can give them that jolt and give them that feeling of sense of discovery, cinema itself is going to go away because people are getting much more of that jolt from serialized streaming shows, whatever their favorite show is, whether they like Better Call Saul or they like the House of the Dragon, or, take your pick, whatever your favorite streaming show is. But we're getting much more of a sense of a jolt of uniqueness from those. Then you look at that list and it's like, there's nothing to discover in any of those movies. It's just variations on a theme. And
the thing I would ask though is like,
IP.
Is anyone really talking about Barbie now or Oppenheimer?
I've actually seen some videos, these from like Barbie supporters at the time who are making videos saying, actually, Barbie was kind of shit. I've seen a few of those.
I wouldn't be surprised, but like, yeah, this is the thing. Like, has it made like a real cultural impact, or was it just a thing that was like a flash in the pan? Like everyone was just excited to go see it because it was just the cool thing to do that summer.
Well, I mean, at
Like-
least Barbie had an interesting take. I mean, you had two independent filmmakers, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, writing a script that a studio. I mean, for a studio movie, it had some interesting stuff going on. I mean, I don't think Barbie wasn't necessarily my thing, but it was unique.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you look at the influence of The Matrix, for example, suddenly you saw this big resurgence of like kung fu heavy movies, like where martial arts took priority, or, you know, bullet time started appearing in every film, or, you know, you started getting movies that dealt with themes of existentialism and, you know, what's the nature of reality. Like, it made a huge cultural impact on the way we saw movies and storytelling and our visual medium. I just wonder, like, has Barbie done anything like that?
No.
And I would probably argue no.
But I still think it got people excited about going to the movies. I mean, look, a movie like The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, that was a big hit. But it didn't have, you know, people loved it and it played out on cable, but I don't think anyone's clamoring for another Fugitive sequel.
Maybe it's a matter of frequency, like, because The Matrix is surrounded, especially in the early 2000s. We got some banger cultural movies coming out alongside it. Like, when you say Barbenheimer, it's like, all right, how far in either direction, both past and future, do we have to go to name the next one of those? It's like, oh,
yeah,
shit.
And also the rise of the internet. I mean, back then, that The Matrix was 1999, and that was the same year of Phantom Menace. And you know, we were so excited for that trailer, we'd spend all night downloading that trailer just to watch it. And The Matrix was also on the cusp of a huge cultural revolution in terms of the internet, high-speed internet coming in, and it had something to say about our culture, even though it was a sci-fi movie, but it was about our culture, how our culture was changing at the time. And and this article that I think I'll read it. No one's making movies about today. Like, our culture is in a really weird, interesting, dangerous, exciting, depressing place.
I would argue that The Matrix Regurgitations is a movie about culture today, and that is why it's so terrible. It's as much a zeitgeist movie as the original Matrix, because just as the original Matrix really captures that late 90s zeitgeist, The Matrix Regurgitated captures that soulless, corporate, plagiaristic, empty, trash culture of the sort of late 2010s, early 2020s.
But in that sense, it succeeds only in sort of emulating every other film that also exemplifies that, even if it wasn't intended to display it.
I think it was. I think Matrix Regurgitations was
true, but it doesn't stand out as a zeitgeist film solely because what it's trying to do is what every other thing around it already does. The Matrix is really interesting because it does come, as Robert says, at the time of the cusp of a brand new technology. It cribs a lot from Ghost in the Shell, so it's not entirely new material. I think they actually had to get permission to continue writing the film they did because certain scenes were so very similar. But both tackle this emergent new technology, which is not just a change in degree from what life had been like before, but it's a change in kind. There'd never really been anything like what was coming in the late 1990s. And like the potential for the thing was kind of being understood well before the technology itself caught up. We don't have anything quite like that at the moment. The closest thing to it is probably AI, but AI has already been done in Hollywood so very many different times in different ways, because conceptually it's the kind of thing you can grasp before the technology becomes around. The problem at the moment is we live in actually incredibly boring times, which is why everything like seems so polarized and dramatic, is the narcissism of small differences. There are no brand new things, no exploration, no real new discoveries being made that can actually shift the zeitgeist in film in terms of unlocking entirely new types of story to tell. So we are just stuck with Barbie, for instance, which never set out to be a zeitgeist film. Barbie is the Super Mario film for girls. All it was is, hey, everyone of your generation played with this as a kid, so here it is on the big screen, go see it. It's not going to try and do anything very new. Actually, Barbie did some kind of attempted to do interesting thematic things, but entirely failed to make them legible. But like its main appeal is just familiarity, and that's what everything is. It's all familiarity. The list that we had on the screen earlier, it's very hard to do the crossing the first threshold in the hero's journey. If your film is Captain America 4, we've done it 4 times already. How many new journeys are you going on?
Illustrate that point, then in that image, you had side by side fucking Insidious 6 and Scary Movie 6.
Jesus Christ. The Conjuring 4.
That there's so much to think about with that. Insidious 6, scary movie. The thing that parodies those very movies is stuck on 6 as well. You're just like, Jesus Christ,
that's
guys.
actually that's a perfect encapsulation. Like scary movie and just below it, Insidious 6, because a movie with a 6 next to it would have been a joke in the 90s, right? It would have been treated as a joke, and now it's
Rocky
fucking
6.
real.
Well, look at 28 years later. I mean, I think I like both of the 28 days and 28 weeks later movies are good.
They missed 28 months, man.
When Marty travels into the future to 2015 in Back to the Future 2, he sees a cinema and it says something like Jaws 10. And that was a joke in the 80s, but now literally Saw 11 is coming out next year.
It was reserved solely, I think, for like the horror slasher movies that managed to climb all the way up there, but they usually had to be in space at that point. It's sort of
like Freddy versus Jason in space, traveling through time or something. Yeah.
The real question is cinema going to even exist in 20 years?
No.
Streaming's going to try and kill it.
You got that combination of streaming and the fact that people's fucking home cinema setups are so ridiculous now that like they basically rival cinema screens anyway. So like, what's the draw?
Well, and the paradigm, the 2-hour paradigm of telling these kinds of stories, if the studios aren't going to make anything. I mean, you think about it, all the movies that we love came out of studios. I mean, they're not all of them, but for the most part, these large franchise properties, the studios were the very best at giving us new things. Because sequels didn't usually work. And all the movies, whether you're talking about Star Wars or Back to the Future or, take your pick, Matrix, these movies that we all love were all original visions brought to us by a motion picture studio. And now we live in this corporatized world where everything is bigger and bigger, whether it's BlackRock and Vanguard owning 88% of the Dow Jones, the stock market. I mean, it's gotten to the point where our society itself, not just Hollywood, but the corporatized. I mean, I feel like we're living in the original rollerball from 1975, where corporations owned everything, and they placated the masses with pomp and circumstance and bread and circuses.
I was about to say it's like Running Man, of which is getting remade as well.
Yeah. although I will defend that, because the story, Stephen King's book. There are 2 books Stephen King wrote as Richard Bachman that are in production right now. One is The Long Walk, which is an incredible, if you've read that. And the other is The Running Man. The Richard Dawson Running Man with Schwarzenegger has no resemblance to the book at all.
Yeah.
And so if they go back, and I know it's isn't it Edgar Wright who's doing
Edgar Wright. Yeah, that's what interests me about it.
Yeah, and I think he's going to go back. The original book ends on I don't know how he can do the ending today. After
it ends with a plane crash, which is bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know. A jetliner into a building.
Yeah, which is doesn't fit well with the aesthetic of the rest of the movie or contemporary
against
history,
the depressing tale that we're all very good at weaving. Though I mean, there is like a couple of rays of light, I suppose, which is that you can see across a number of different mediums, whether it's like manga or whether it's even streaming services from showing things from Korea, or whether it's the Wukong game, which is coming out of China at the moment. There are still infusions of new material. It's that we aren't really making it here. There's a qualitative difference in the sense that most of these things are actually very well made with a basic regard for the structure of storytelling, and they're not too navel-gazily when it comes to their own political opinions and all the rest of that stuff. But they are all, some of them at least, are transposing myths from other cultures which we have not yet encountered into our culture for the first time, which makes it seem like a brand new and quite revitalizing thing. So the more of that can happen, the better. And it would be nice if the Chinese actually started making more of their own good films as opposed to trying to replicate Hollywood for their own country, because then we might get new good stories. But there are still some coming through. It's just that we in the West are generally a little bit bored, I think, of ourselves. We don't look to the myths that we haven't yet adapted. We're not very interested in them. We don't really teach people about them either. That's also the reason for the decline in sort of the epic history film as well, because we're just not that interested. And I suspect the Gladiator 2 movie will not help to change that particular trajectory.
Well,
Is anyone?
it's a
are you
sad
guys
state of
interested?
affairs as well. Like when Western culture has to turn towards like the East, when it has to look for Korea, Japan, China, like to give us good stories now because we're not capable of creating them for ourselves.
I mean, unfortunately, this is a bit of a push and pull, but look at the box office. A lot of the most successful shit is franchise or sequel or comes from something that's at least commonly known. Like, even Barbie comes from a very iconic franchise. You know what I'm saying? Like the Deadpool and Wolverine, for example, doing as well as it did. It's like that's, in a way, some bad news in a sense of just like, oh, fuck, they're going to want to crank that now because they'll be like, well, this is what you guys want.
I mean, I was really disappointed to see Alien Romulus do as well as it did because I want that fucking franchise to just die. There's so much really good space horror that you could do. There's so many novels you could adapt.
Oh yeah,
right. Like fucking Blake Crouch, he's a really good sci-fi writer. He has some really good ideas to do with time travel and things like that and alternate universes. Not in the dumb Marvel sense, but actually in an interesting, new, fresh, sort of modern sci-fi sense. There's so much good shit out there that you could adapt. And instead, you want to do the billionth Alien movie that is just a fucking regurgitation of shit we've seen before.
Alien 3 gets off to that awful fucking start, but that film has a style. It has some brilliant cinematography, amazing performances, some really interesting dynamics and characters, and then, of course, like religious themes getting injected that are actually, like, in terms of how they're handled, are very interesting, I think. Alien 4,
I totally agree.
Wacky, bizarre fucking thing, but it's brand new in a sense, right? Like the ingredients they're throwing in, what they're trying to get to work for us. It's just like, okay, I see you give it a try. Then you get to even a Prometheus. We're like, wow, Ridley, this is some crazy shit. And to me, I don't know what it is exactly, but like seeing all of them try, even Paul W.S. Anderson, right, with AVP, it's very much a him movie. It's like it's the Alien and the Predator, the way it's edited, how cheesy and schlocky a lot of it is. You're like, oh, that's your take on this. Alien Romulus, it's like depressing to me. I was like, no, I don't want the
worst. I consider it the worst Alien movie because it is so derivative. And I would say, I would go as far as to say plagiaristic. It outright plagiarizes beat for beat aspects of Alien. It tries to get bits of Aliens in there, doesn't do it very well, and it just copies Alien for the most part. It's actually quite disgusting, and for that reason, I would rate it as the worst.
It takes little bits of every
it really
movie
does.
in the series and tries to like put it together into a greatest
fucking
hit.
Ripped off Resurrection. I can't fucking believe it. I couldn't believe it. You took one of the most iconically stupid scenes in one of the worst Alien movies. You copied it.
By the way, is the narrative still that this was mid? Because I've seen this narrative come out. Oh, it's not that bad. It's mid. It's like, are you out of your fucking mind? This isn't mid. This is terrible.
Well,
because a lot of people think it's mid.
I was under the impression everyone loved it. I thought we had like quite a minority perspective on this one.
I do. I like this question here. Like, I just think this cuts to the core of the whole question. Like, are we over entertained as a culture? Is there just too much?
No,
I feel like
too many
everyone's ready.
options?
Everyone's ready to bite the fuck into something amazing. I feel like we are. We can handle it.
We're saturated in incredibly shallow entertainment. I said this when Avatar 2 came out, and I'm pretty sure, in fact, I can reuse the introduction for my Avatar 2 video for the Avatar 3 film when that comes out. But basically comparing that film to the Feelies from Brave New World, which is entirely divorced of content. It's just pretty colors. It's the most superficial kind of entertainment. It is entertaining after a fashion, but it doesn't really do anything. Like it's so surface level. It's just designed to titillate the senses and basically nothing else. It's not really designed to tell a convincing story. That's the kind of film that we are surrounded by. Alien Romulus is an example of that. I'd say Deadpool and Wolverine is an example of that as well. It's just designed to look at what your most easily tweaked little emotional responses are, and that tends to be things like nostalgia and fond memories, and just stick those on the screen. And people will sit there and they'll be entertained, and I can understand why people find that stuff entertaining. But by the same token, you are not going to be talking about Alien Romulus in a month's time, maybe even not 2 weeks' time from this point, because all it does is remind you of when those films were good. All its best moments were good moments in other films. It doesn't have anything to offer for itself. And if you actually do go and sit down for a film wanting it to tell you a good new story, then you're going to find that film quite offensive. But the fact that the film is done well suggests that a lot of people are not overly concerned about that.